One of the most common types of academic essay you'll have to write is the comparison contrast essay, where you'll be asked to talk about the similarities and differences of two subjects. Now, it probably won't be as easy as comparing two cities. You'll probably have to compare something like two theories or two characters in two totally different novels. The most important thing to remember with comparison is to avoid the obvious. If you have two subjects that are very similar, of course it's easy to focus on similarities, but it's probably more interesting to try to focus on the differences. Now, before we talk about the essay structure, it's important to mention that you should probably watch the video on basic essay structure first, okay? So the comparison contrast essay introduction is basically the same as the other essays we've discussed. The hook will engage the reader and introduce both subjects, which is very important. The background will give any essential information that the reader needs to understand the main point of the essay. And then the thesis statement will focus the comparison for the reader. Now, I'll mention something about thesis statements in a moment. The main difference between the comparison contrast essay and the other essays that we've discussed is that you have options with this kind of essay. There are really two different options that you can choose from. The first one is what we call the block method, which means you have two body paragraphs that are organized in this fashion. You can have a similarities differences essay, which means you have one paragraph that is entirely focused on the similarities between these two subjects, and one paragraph that is entirely focused on the differences between the two subjects, making sure that each paragraph has a clear topic sentence. Another form of the block essay is what you might call a subject-to-subject essay, which in one paragraph gives all the information about one subject. In the next paragraph, it focuses entirely on subject B. Okay, so that's one option. The second option, and in my opinion the slightly more interesting of the two, is what we call the point-by-point comparison contrast essay, where instead of focusing only on similarities and differences, you choose two or more points of comparison. Now, if, for example, you were comparing two restaurants, certain points that you could use to compare them would be atmosphere, menu, service, and so on. So in the point-by-point body, each paragraph focuses on one point, either with the similarities or the differences. So for example, in that essay about restaurants, paragraph 1 would focus entirely on the atmosphere of both restaurants. Paragraph 2 could focus entirely on the service at both of those restaurants and how they are similar or different. After you've done that, of course, you have your conclusion, which is the same as pretty much all essays that we've talked about. You want to summarize your main points, and you want to end with a final statement to leave the reader with a lasting impression, perhaps a final opinion. Now, the most important part to keep in mind about the point-by-point essay is that whatever points you're discussing in your body have to be mentioned in the thesis statement. Now, with the block method, the thesis statement could be slightly more general, but if I were to write an essay about the restaurants and my points were atmosphere and service, I have to make sure to include the words atmosphere and service in my thesis statement. So that's basic comparison contrast.
This week you will be writing your first major essay, which is the compare and contrast essay. In the past, your professors or teachers have requested that you write both a contrast and a comparison essay. For this assignment, I want you to choose one or the other. Compare, show the similarities, or contrast, show the differences between the two stories, Sonny's Blues and The Rich Brother. I've given you some information here about the content that I'm expecting from you as you write your comparison contrast essay. There's some background information here about saying that this is one of the most common essays written in all of the, you'll find it in history, you'll find it in psychology, so it's a common type of essay, okay? Down here, and again, this is something that I encourage you to read. This really does give you good information about what I expect. I've given you an example. You may want to even do this in your preparation for writing the comparison or contrast essay. You may want to put over here The Rich Brother, over here Sonny's Blues, and look at the different characters, see how they are dissimilar, and then see what they're common. How are they common? Then again, you have to choose one or the other. Don't do both. It becomes very complicated if you try to do both. Okay, more information is given here also. Okay. You have a lot of reading to do this week, beginning in chapter 4, the writing process. This will be good information, again, about the process of going from pre-writing all the way to your final submission, your final draft. On pages 104 to 114, gives you information about how to write the comparative paper. Writing about short stories. Now, what I like about this section is that it will show you how to include text from the stories as evidence for your analysis. That's important to do. You need to have textual evidence that will support your thesis statement. Here are some more information about families, about this unit, and then the two different stories that you'll be reading. Here's a chart that might help you in your pre-writing. It's not due until July 2nd, so you have about a week and a half to do this. In the past, I have asked you to submit your papers to the writing project or the online writing tutorial. They do not have enough staff to accommodate us during the summer. So you are going to do self-evaluations. That's the only way I can have you do some sort of a revision with your paper. If you want, and I suggest this, find somebody in the class to read your paper as a way of revising your paper. I've given you another video here explaining the comparing and contrasting essay. The discussion is here. There are some useful links about information about the different stories. There's a lecture on Sonny's Blues, a lecture on The Rich Brother, some more information about comparing and contrasting, and again, one more site to go to. Here I've given you some more information. I've tried to make this as clear as I possibly can. Sample papers of the type of the genre that you'll be writing, which is the compare and contrast essay. Also, I want you to title your essay. Make sure that you have an engaging title. And I've given you some information here that will help you with that. The checklist is here, and that's it for this week. I will talk to you later.
That's all, folks.